Humans only have 5 senses: myth or reality. A video done by Brian Gerard, Zach Hartman, James Triner, and Katie Charkalis. So how many senses do humans have? We were always told we had 5: taste, touch, hearing, smell, and sight. But what if we were told that you were lied to all your life?
I think I'm entitled. You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
In reality, humans have far more than the traditional 5 senses. You may be thinking to yourself, what else do humans need other than taste, touch, hearing, smell, and sight that would classify as senses? Well, what about when you trip but still manage to stay on your feet? Your sense of balance comes in to save the day. How about when you accidentally touch something burning hot and quickly retract your hand? That's your sense of temperature. Or how about your ability to know that your arms are still attached to your body when your eyes are closed? That's a sense too. These other senses that are extremely vital to the human nervous system and the human body as a whole. In the next few minutes, you'll be even more convinced that these senses actually exist. Let's start with what others say about this phenomenon. Well, according to various other neuroscientists and psychologists, there are somewhere between 22 and 33 human senses. That is a much higher number than what we discussed before. Maybe we weren't crazy after all. This is scientific proof from viable sources that the human senses expand beyond the original 5. Watch as Barry C. Smith, a professor at the University of London, explains.
So often we think we've just got 5 senses, but that's completely wrong. If we ask neuroscientists how many senses do we have, they say anywhere between 22 and 33. Just think of your sense of balance. If you didn't have that, it would be very difficult to get around. You'd be in big trouble. Proprioception. If you close your eyes now, you know where your limbs are without looking or feeling. You just know. Kinesthesia, sense of movement. So immediately we start to ask ourselves, why 5? Well, Aristotle told us we had 5 senses, and we believe that he was wrong about there being 5 elements that governed all of reality, but somehow we still cling on to this idea of 5. So I think it's interesting that people often think of philosophers as doing something which is esoteric and irrelevant. But you realize the power that philosophy has had on our ordinary view of ourselves and our conception of our experience. We still are in the grip of an Aristotelian view of our senses. And the question is, are we getting the data right when we start to philosophize on that basis? Well, if we think there are 5 senses, and we think that they're working independently of one another, as we've done for about 2,500 years, we may be starting with the wrong premises. The other thing is that Descartes taught us that when we're interested in the relationship between appearance and reality, we might be wrong about the way the world is around us. Our senses might mislead us. But somehow we couldn't be wrong about our experience. And I think one of the things that we might be learning through neuroscience and its interaction with philosophy is that we're not as good at knowing about our own experience as we think we are.
Notice in the video that Smith points out examples of different types of senses that we have discussed already. He goes on to tell us that our 5 senses would not be the same without the other extra senses that humans possess. For example, he explains that when in an airplane, the cabin will appear smaller towards the front when the plane is at an inclination taking off than when it is completely horizontal on the ground. Our sense of sight changes here because of our sense of balance, telling us that we're in a different position than before. Examples like these clarify and confirm that there are far more than our 5 senses, and that our 5 senses are actually affected and sometimes enhanced because of those other senses.
Never leaving my house again. That's crazy talk.
That's not crazy talk.
To illustrate as to how widely accepted this myth is, we conducted a survey at Bucknell University with 55 respondents. We asked a series of simple questions such as, are there more senses than the traditional 5 senses? How many senses do you believe humans have? If I were to lose my sense of smell, would I still have my sense of taste? And would you consider the feeling of pain, time passing, or balance as a sense? We also asked if they recognized nociception, proprioception, equilibrioception, or thermoception as senses, along with a rate on a Richter scale of 1 to 10 as to how surprised they would be if there were more than 5 senses.
Yes.
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 No.
No. 6.
More than 6.
5.
6.
6.
5.
No.
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 Yes.
No.
No.
No. None of them.
Thermoception.
None of the above.
None of the above.
None of the above.
None of the above.
None of the above. Yes.
Yes.
Sense of pain.
Yes.
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 I think time passing, yeah. Not surprised.
Not surprised.
7.
Not surprised.
1.
5. 6.
As the results portray, 61.8% of respondents had a hint that there are more than the traditional 5 senses, but 38.2% of respondents were unfamiliar as to what were the other senses in the traditional 5. As for other responses, 23.6% of respondents did believe in there being a 6th sense and no more than that. When asked about the recognition of other senses of the body, 65.5% of respondents had no idea as to what any of them were. In conclusion, the majority of the campus's belief on the myth was that it was false that the body only has 5 senses, but over 1/3 of the student population were set on the myth being reality. As a fun fact, Professor Myers has 36.4% of campus to go after, with them believing you lose your sense of taste if you lost your sense of smell. We can thank Greek philosopher Aristotle for introducing the 5 senses myth prevalent today. He was the first person to claim the body only has 5 senses, and that ultimately stood into today's society.
That was genius, Lloyd. Sheer genius. I mean, where did you come up with a scale like that? Saw it in a movie once. It's incredible.
People today believe we still only have 5 senses because they tend to mash together the body's senses, such as touch and pain. People also feel some senses are implicit and are just part of the body's biology. They do not associate certain abilities with being human senses, such as chronoception, the sense of time passing. Now, we are going to describe multiple senses outside of the traditional 5, such as proprioception, nociception, thermoception, and equilibrioception. Proprioception. This is the sense of self-awareness and ownership of your limbs without the use of your sight. For example, a person with excellent proprioception would be able to know exactly in the universe where your hand is when their eyes are closed. As proven by an experiment performed by Guterstam, Bourgeois-Daughter, Gentile, and Erson, they were able to support the claim of proprioception in patients by the use of an fMRI machine. The use of out-of-body illusions allowed researchers to view different brain function corresponding to different self-awareness/location variables. The results showed that the synchronous, as opposed to the asynchronous, condition was associated with strong and unambiguous sense of self-location in the out-of-body position and a weak sense of self-location in a vertical position inside the scanner." End quote.
Another sense that humans possess is nociception, which is the sense of pain.
Don't need a shot.
Trust me, you want a shot. It's swollen. It's gonna hurt like a...
There. Can I go now?
That didn't even hurt.
I have superpowers, okay?
Notice in the Grey's Anatomy clip, the girl has superpowers because she can't feel pain. The reason why this surprises Dr. Karev is because all humans can feel pain, which proves it's a human sense. Though this is not a scientific study, it still shows that we are aware of these non-traditional senses, whether we know it or not. In a study done by Johnstone and others, it looks closely at thermoception and nociception in humans. They wanted to figure out if there was a characterization between stimulation, in this case increasing temperature, and pain response involving a sensory threshold. Trying to avoid the self-reporting method, which would alter the results, the researchers used different responses to MEG-derived neural responses in S1 and S2 to 4 magnitudes of pain stimuli. Using this, they delivered temperature and pain stimulations to subjects. The temperature was regulated by a device attached directly to the skin on their arm. The subject was then asked to give a signal once their pain level reached an 8 out of 11 on the point scale. The study found that pain is a response to sensory input that depends on the person experiencing the stimulus. In addition, the activations of neural pathways in response to the various temperature and threshold levels of sensory pain was derived independently of self-reports, proving that thermoception and nociception are measurable human senses.
Thermoception. As we discussed before, this is the sense of how humans and animals perceive temperature, but more precisely, it is how we perceive differences in heat influx. The sensation or feeling of temperature is detected by thermoreceptors, which then send neurotransmitters to the thalamus. Little information is known about the thermoreceptors, but it is generally accepted by scientists that mammals have at least two: hot and cold. However, a recent study in 2015 by Zuming Zhang showed that many temperature-sensitive ion channels and receptors have been identified, and some of them act as molecular thermometers involved in thermosensation. Also, thermotransduction is governed by both thermosensors and modulators. When thermoception fails, the most commonly associated dysfunction is ciliopathy. Genetic disorder of cellular cilia, which are important for guiding development, are affected, so issues with them can lead to a variety of problematic situations. For thermosensation, a common symptom is that this becomes defective due to ciliated epithelial cellular dysfunction, which is dysfunction in the outermost tissue layer of organs and blood vessels. In this case, the skin is severely affected, resulting in no thermosensation, most likely due to damage in the thermoreceptors. Equilibrioception. This is the physiological sense in humans and animals of balance. It's what keeps us from falling over when we're standing walking and allows us to perform all basic motor functions. It uses a variety of systems and senses to operate correctly, such as proprioception, the visual system, and the vestibular system. The vestibular ocular reflex is what helps keep objects in focus by having the region of the inner ear work with the visual system. The other half of balance uses the skeletal system. It processes all information received from the visual field in front of you and your position in relation to it to control all motor movements. Gymnasts have an exceptional sense of balance and proprioception because they must balance and sense where they are on the beam and then adjust to it without falling off, all while aiming to stick a perfect landing. When this system fails, disorientation, nausea, and diarrhea are common side effects. This can be caused by problems such as Meniere's disease, vertigo, inner ear infections, bad common colds, or canal dehiscence syndrome. Impairment of any of the systems contributing to your sense of balance can result in those symptoms as well, but most commonly inner ear issues. People with Meniere's disease often say that they feel like the world is spinning, and that is a disease with an issue of the inner ear. Astronauts also have problems with balance after being in space or in anti-gravity for a while because they begin to feel weightless.
We've shown you that humans have far more than the five senses. Research from various studies and neuroscientists have systematically run experiments proving the non-traditional five senses of proprioception, thermoception, equilibrioception, and nociception. People are aware of the extra senses, but are not cognizant of what they mean. Aristotle put the idea that we only have five senses, and this principle is still widely accepted. Though we may only think of senses as the typical five, we have to consider the human functions that our brains are responsible for. With this knowledge, we can accept the wonder and beauty of our minds and put the rest to myth.